Welcome to this Tutor to You Criminology video for WJEC Level 3 Criminology. In this video we're going to examine different forms of deviance as part of Unit 2's Criminological Theories. So far in this series we've looked at defining crime and deviance and identifying both criminal and deviant acts. But students also need to know about the different forms of deviance. Whilst deviance can be criminal, not all deviant activity breaks the law. And so we need to be familiar with other forms of deviance as well. Some deviant behaviour is viewed positively, for example where people deviate from the norms and values of society in order to innovate or create something new that is worthwhile. This could be products, or it could be challenging the way that people think and could lead to greater freedom for groups of individuals. Deviant behaviour may also be simply unusual behaviour rather than bad behaviour. If we look back at our original definition of deviance as acting against the expected norms and values of society, there are many alternative ways to act. And while these are technically deviating from society's norms, it doesn't make them illegal, immoral, or even undesirable behaviours. They are simply different ways of acting. In this video we'll look at three forms of deviance: bad deviance, odd deviance, and firstly, admired deviance. Admired deviance is a behaviour that goes against the norms and values of society, but the actions of the person who is deviant are seen as heroic or admirable. This is where people act in ways that others may not be able to, but are admired for their actions, rather than facing social disapproval. There are many examples of this type of behaviour. For example, firefighters, particularly those who risk their own lives to try and save people in major tragedies such as the collapse of the Twin Towers in New York, or those who tried to save people during the Grenfell Tower fire in London. Most people would not think about sacrificing themselves for strangers, and so the acts of these firefighters is technically deviant and admirable. Further examples include people who deviate against social norms to protest against rules or laws that they believe to be unfair. For example, Rosa Parks' refusal to get out of her seat for white passengers challenged the segregation of black and white Americans. By not giving up her seat, she was deviating from social norms and received widespread acclaim for doing so. A second form of deviance is odd deviance. This, quite simply, is eccentric behaviour that doesn't conform to the norms and values that most people would uphold. Whilst it's not illegal, it is perceived to be abnormal and not the done thing. One such area where this is often the case is fashion, which consistently challenges perceptions of what social norms are. For example, in the mid to late 1970s, designer Vivienne Westwood looked to challenge mainstream norms and values of how people should look through her clothing, and this was worn extensively in the London punk scene. Other artists and musicians can also be seen to demonstrate odd deviance, acting in ways that aren't the social norm. From David Bowie in the 1960s to Harry Styles recently, there have been trends for men wearing women's clothing and makeup to challenge social norms. Many bands and musicians have also destroyed expensive instruments after concerts, something which at the time was seen as unreasonable and chaotic behaviour, yet not illegal. Hence, it is odd deviance. Finally, we come to bad deviance, and this is usually deviant activities that break the law as well as social norms and values. Bad deviance is perceived as being undesirable by the majority of society at a given time. Murder, theft, and sexual assault are examples of bad deviance. However, what is perceived as bad deviance can change based upon social attitudes and different contexts. For example, while in the UK homosexuality would have been perceived as bad deviance in the 1960s, in ancient Greece it was seen as normal and legitimate behaviour. From 1969 onwards, homosexuality has been legal in the UK, yet for many years was perceived as deviant by some in society. However, changing social attitudes have seen homophobic behaviour become deviant, rather than the norm. Another example of bad deviance is murder. Yet depending upon the context, murder can be seen as acceptable. For example, in war, where individuals may be faced with taking somebody's life to save their own and the lives of others. When evaluating deviant behaviour, you have to consider that not all deviance is seen as being a negative behaviour. Many social changes and innovations have come from individuals deviating from social norms and values to create something new or to challenge rules and laws that do not reflect social attitudes. For example, challenges to sexism, racism and homophobia all began as deviant behaviours, and yet ultimately changed the way in which many people think in society today. A final thing to remember is that deviance is a social construction. It depends upon the norms and values of the society that we live in, and so what is deviant in one society may not be deviant in another. That concludes this Tutor to You Criminology video looking at types of deviance. Thanks for watching.